Oh, I remember a lot of things from my childhood, and the older I become, new things come to my mind.
Well, we lived out on a little farm that didn't make a living for us. It was up in the hills, and so we were about a mile from school, all 8 grades in one room, and I suppose the room was about full, maybe 20 children. And there was a church down from there, a Baptist church, about a block and a half. And when it rained, it was so muddy that we used to try to see who could get the biggest shoe, because the mud is dobby and it would stick to your shoes.
My paternal grandparents came over from Russia basically with the idea of going to Cotopaxi. I don't know if you ever heard of that. That was supposedly a farming area that they were sending some of the Jewish immigrants out west to farm. People would say that they needed some farmers and they'd bring them out. Well, they got there, they found out that what they really wanted was miners.
I'm Irish on both sides. See, there's nothing in between. It's all Irish. So that's why I claim Irish. And when I first came, it was my intention just to come for a short time. But I'm still here, so it speaks for itself.
And then when I got here, it was then it struck me that I was here forever. I thought at first I was just on vacation and I wouldn't settle, I was going home. But gradually the people were so nice and we were accepted so well that it really wasn't long before we felt part of Denver and the country, and we were quite happy.
I was born in Colorado in the Dark Ages.
We came here because of my uncle had tuberculosis.
My dad was Irish descent. His folks came from Ireland.
We moved to Denver because my father had tuberculosis. He was at the National Jewish Hospital for about a year. And then he got better and well, and we liked Denver, so we stayed here.
My grandparents on both sides were Colorado families, so I've heard lots of stories about Denver in the old days right up to 1995.
We would spend our summers, 2 summers out here in Colorado and way out in the west, out in the little cabin up by Evergreen, which is a tiny little town, had the church and the general store and a few houses and a few other stores. 1 mile this side of Evergreen, the little cabin is still there that we rented in 1914. It's all black now, and but it still sits there by the highway.
We have lived in this neighborhood since 1927, I think, 26 or 27. And we started in first grade at St. Vincent's.
Mother had tuberculosis, so we came out here, just she and I. Well, we came on the train, and I remember my mother, we saw the outline of the mountains, and I said, "Those are mountains," and she says, "Oh no, they're not." And of course I told you so.
Denver was a big town, at least I thought it was. We lived down below there where the ballpark is now, on 15th and Delcourt. That's where I was born. And I don't know what else to tell you. I used to play baseball. I used to play football. I was a tomboy.
Well, I've lived here most of the 89 years. I'll be 89 June the 20th. My father always took me sledding in the snow. We lived on the west side at that time. And he got a sled and tied me down, you know, so I wouldn't fall out, and took me down Colfax Hill in the sled.
Well, the neighborhoods were good. You didn't even have to lock your doors. You could go away and leave them unlocked. Of course, we always locked ours. And my grandmother lived down in the Elyria part of town, I think it was, and she lived by a railroad track. Trains, you know, a lot of trains in those days. And bums, the hobos they used to call them, would come knocking at her back door. She'd take them in, feed them, pack them a lunch, and away they'd go. Never, ever got attacked or anything. Nothing.
So we went out to the stockyards and out near there in the open fields, and we were messing around, and all of a sudden, from the top of a couple boxcars, I'd say 2 or 3 blocks away, these kids started to shoot at us with 22s. You could hear bzzz. And we ducked down in a hill behind the low place. We figured out if you went out and around, finally, you could get away from them and we'd be out of sight. So we all started to do that, and I felt a pain in my arm here. And I said, "Oh, I've been peppered." Well, anyway, I got hit with one of those bullets.
My sister bought me the first trumpet I ever played, and I was 10. Well, she actually brought it for my brother, and his teeth came in sharp, so I decided I'd like to play it, so I went to the bandmaster of the Denver Post Boys Band, and I asked if I could be in his band, and he said yes. So I started going to rehearsals, and I became a member of the Denver Post Boys Band at 10.
They had streetcars all over. They had streetcars on 16th, 17th, Larmer Street, and they had those wires going clear up that used to run the streetcar. And sometimes the wire would come loose and the streetcar would stop, and the conductor would have to go out and put the wire back up there on the top.
Denver then, in them days, was much quieter than it is these days, and it's a lovely little western town, you know. And I do believe there was no traffic lights at that time when I came. I don't remember them because we used to go out riding Sunday afternoons.
The air was so fresh out here that people come from the east with bad lungs, and they'd live under a tree or something, or get a house that was away from anything else. And they took no medicine at all, but it cleared their lungs and they got well.
Well, I had to take the streetcar into downtown and then back up to North High School. And going down, the air was practically black. The buildings were black with soot from all the coal that was being burnt at that time.
Yeah, we used to heat that way. And I know my mother was always cleaning her curtains and dusting. Wow. Yeah, and during the winter, the air wasn't very clean. But in the summertime it was.
The flood, I should say, it was sudden. We didn't know it was coming. They yelled and told us as it was coming. It was really a horrible thing. The Cherry Creek was full. It was flowing over its banks, and if we hadn't gotten to this 2-story building, heavens knows what would have happened to us.
At that time, the Ku Klux Klan was very powerful in Colorado, and they openly proclaimed that no Catholic, Jew, or black would ever be allowed to hold office in Colorado.
They used to discriminate me. They used to call me a dirty Jew and things like that. But I used to fight them back. I was a tomboy.
Well, the one thing that I can remember is they used to call us rednecks. And so, of course, I envisioned this big red piece on the back of our neck.
Oh, I think occasionally you might hear some kind of a remark, but I never felt any discrimination.
They were just prejudiced in the sorority, and I think that's the reason I never took too much part in it.
Every Friday night for 2 years, a cross was burned on the small lot between Atlanta and Delaware Street. Nobody knew who lit it. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody caught anybody. And I think it's simply because people were afraid.
If you had an Irish name, you couldn't get a job, yeah. And there was some man, I don't know where it was, but this happens to be true, I believe, wanted workers, and he put on his gates, workers needed, but no Irish need apply. And somebody came along, some Irishman I imagine, came along and said, oh, whoever wrote this wrote it well, because the same is written on the gates of hell. That was supposed really to have happened, because there was a lot of discrimination, and if you're Irish back in the early days, a lot of them changed their names to get a job.
It was pretty rampant right here in Denver. It was bad. Of course, I never ran into a lot of that personally, but I know it was here and it was bad, and they were doing some horrible things, but I personally never ran right into it. But they really started right here in Denver. It was awful.
There was a building on top of Castle Rock. Castle Rock, the mountain which is used in the Coors beer ad. It was used at that time. There was a wooden building up there, and I think they had a cross up there. And at some time in the 20s, I think, the cross was burned. And afterwards, I heard about the Ku Klux Klan, although at the time, as a child, I just knew that this was an important event.
Between Lafayette and the little east of Lafayette, there was where they used to gang up and ride with their hoods and horses and stuff. We used to go in the car, me in the car with them, and my granddad had shined the spotlight on them. He used to hate them.
It was against the church, the Catholic Church, but they didn't do anything to them. Later you found out it was some of your friends that belonged to the club, because it just sounded like a nice, smart club.
Some say that that really the Jews and the Catholics kind of stick together in a way because they were both persecuted.
No, the Jewish people are entirely different than the Irish.
They each are deep with kindness. I suppose it has to be religion that's done it, but they both have the same gentle kindness.
I think they're very family-oriented, both of them.
Religion and that, we never mentioned it. In fact, I don't think we even knew they were Jewish or not.
I think education has always been very important in the Jewish family, and I think also in the Irish family.
Standing up for what you believe in and living by your views and sticking with them in crisis is important to both, I think.
God, if a Jewish girl married a Gentile boy, man, it was the talk of the town.
They felt that Catholics should marry Catholics. And
There was this guy, and he kind of liked me. We got to be friendly. And so he asked to come out to my house, and I said, okay. So he came out, and we were sitting on the porch, so we had a huge porch. And my mother, I introduced him, and so in a few minutes she said, come in here a minute. So I went in. She says, do you know he's a Jew? She says, you get rid of that guy right now.
They'd have thrown me out of the house with the Irish boy.
But if I'd had a boy that I liked and he was Jewish, it wouldn't have made any difference to me, I don't believe. And
Many families disowned their children, just wouldn't have anything to do with them if they married out of the faith. Other families accepted. Some families required a conversion.
I really don't know, but I think the church would frown on a mixed marriage.
Even if they would have said, we admire your Jewish friend and we know he's a fine man and very good man, still the obstacles would be too great to overcome. They wouldn't have wanted her to marry a Jewish man, I know.
I'm sure there were families who would have disliked their kids to marry out of the religion. I'm sure there were. Listen, there were very, very religious Jewish people, very, very ultra-religious. They would consider their children died if they married out of their religion. They would mourn for them.
Nobody made any difference between where they were born or what their backgrounds were at that time. Everybody got along.
I was a flapper.
I was a flapper.
And I suppose they might call me a flapper.
I was a flapper.
She was what you call a flapper. She had the bangs and down the side of her face, you know, it's coal black hair. And the minute she opened the door, she had so much perfume on it would probably knock you for a loop. She just reeked of, it was Cody Paris, I think.
We had galoshes with wide tops, and we wore them flat down. And we'd trudge along, and the mud would get in. I was a flapper with the full skirt and a headband, and I was just like any other girl, only I was more prudish.
I used to love it. We wore short skirts, Charleston, wore short hair with king tut haircuts. Yeah, I used to flirt. And I was always dancing. I had always had dates. I was popular. That's what you called a flapper.
But the flappers were just girls. Nice girls, some not so nice.
But in those days, you would date all the girls you knew. And of course, the places we used to go was in the summertime, we'd go to Elitch Gardens. That was a good place to go. It was rather cheap. And in the wintertime, we'd go to the Cosmopolitan Hotel to dance. And all these big bands played there.
There was no radio and no television, and so if you wanted music at your party, you had to have live entertainment.
We had things like concerts and dances and get-togethers, you know, parties and homes and things like that.
During the 20s, men and women had the same instincts that they do today.
There was 3 of them. There was Al and my husband and Ben Boxer. They had one suit among them. And each one of them, whenever they had a date, that's the one that wore the suit.
Well, of course, there was prohibition, and I got to admit that when I was about 16, as I say, I always had one boyfriend on the string. And we went where they had, where they were making beer. I was only 16. I won't tell you his name. He still could go to jail. No, I don't think he's even alive. But we would ring the bell, and they'd go through a peephole and see who it was and let us in. And they were making, in these places, making beer. And that was prohibition.
There were places here where they were open tables. There were also places with booths, with curtains.
I was about 10, 11 years old. My mother used to give me a pint of liquor in a bag, and I'd walk over the West Colfax Street viaduct to deliver the liquor.
Talking about prohibition, I remember my grandfather used to make the wine down in his cellar so we could have it for sacramental purposes during the year.
And all of a sudden they couldn't get their liquor. A lot of them made it in the basement and had it anyway, so it didn't matter.
It led to bootlegging, it led to speakeasies, it led to gangsterism.
They were catching so many of these people making liquor and selling it, and so that come to a kind of a halt.
your name was all important. You didn't cast any dirt or darkness or scandal on your name.
I don't know. I'd like to think there still are people who are men of their word. I know in my own experience many people today who live by their beliefs.
I don't know, people today, you're more or less kind of afraid of them and their appearance, and people aren't as friendly today as they were back in those days.
I remember radio starting, and you know when they had these little crystal sets? That was the first time, and I thought it was like a miracle, listening to this, you know. And the next thing you know, there was radios, and then television. There was nothing like that when I came here. There was nothing like that in England. We had nothing like that, well, yet we had a good life.
Yeah, I think everybody's changed. I think the whole world has changed. In those days, it was a happier. Denver was smaller. It was a happier life, I think.
Well, they're much more sophisticated, of course, and their values are different too. Well, still even then, I don't know. It just seemed like they judged you by how much money you had.
Well, I think people have become more broad-minded. I think that World War I and World War II especially taught them that there's a certain amount of independency that must be accepted.
All the dances that they were dancing at that time, just about like maybe now, the way kids dance, the older people thought, boy, that's way out of line. So I guess that's the way the older people thought at that time.
There were good people then, and there are many good people now. And if we could think of the good people instead of the bad are trying to have more than they need. They don't appreciate what they have, and they think the other guy gets everything and they don't, which is wrong, but the world has gone that way. So there isn't the peace there was before.
We grew up wanting, and we're so grateful when we got anything. Today people get things so easily, the children do especially, that they don't value anything. You admire people for wanting to better themselves, but they also have to know how to deal with it.
We were able to get candy for a penny, and if we had 2 or 3 cents, we would get some candy and give some to our friends, and then we expected them to give us some back the next time.
In our block, too, where we grew up, the neighbors were very wonderful to all of us.
Oh.
And my mother, in turn, was very good to them when they had hard times, as everybody did.
What happened with us is you got a job and you kept working at it until you made something out of it.
Even before the Depression, it was hard to get jobs.
Yeah, I have more opportunities in this country, I think, for education, if you'll accept it. When I think about the children in school now, how they misuse it, and the things that's going on, it's really frightening.
I am sorry to say that I think our schools have deteriorated.
And there's carrying guns to school. It's strange. I've said to many people, we used to be afraid of the teachers. Now the teachers are afraid of the kids. That's true.
You would just look forward to going downtown. It was so great. And you dress up and you had these little white gloves on, and everyone would look their best, and you'd see everyone you knew, and you'd see how they were dressed, all the styles. And at Christmas time, it was just fabulous.
I remember that you could get on the streetcar. What was it? Children under 6 were
were
free. And I said she was 4 and I was 5. We still had to pay.
I I think Denver in the 20s was a booming metropolis where life was really bustling and growing. It was a growing, thriving city.
Saturday was sort of religious. You go downtown, have lunch, take you an hour to get through 16th Street because you'd run into all of your friends. You'd have lunch at a place called Bowers, which was, everybody went there. And everybody sort of knew everybody. And no, it's impersonal today. It's too big a city as far as I'm concerned. But I love it, of course.
In fact, you can expect anything at any time here in Colorado.
We found the arrowheads, and they were all in a pile, as though you could imagine the Indian had sat there and made his arrows. It was so neat. It had rained, so the topsoil had been washed off, and here were these pile of arrowheads.
It's like the old Irish lady said, blessed be nothing. And it's true. You don't have to be rich to be happy.
I still have that sense of enjoying everything a lot. It doesn't take a lot to please me, and I think it comes from the time I was raised, and we just didn't have as much.
It's a different world, Jamie. I wonder what it'll be in the next 50 years. Be different again. Be different to what you're knowing now.
I just remember that. It was the best of times, to my notion.
All that band, they're all gone, but this old lady, this one, is left. I keep saying, I don't want to stop or I'll flop. So I keep going. I'm going to keep going.
All alone, I'm so all alone. There is no one else but you. All alone by the telephone, waiting for